He didn't follow her because he wanted her. He followed her because 40,000 in cash had gone missing from the strong box in the east cellar, and Casimir Orsini did not believe in coincidences. 3 weeks before a marriage that would fold two families into one, the quietest woman in his house began leaving the estate at midnight and coming back before dawn with her coat soaked to the knee. So he drove behind her with his headlights off, expecting a courier, a lover, a leak. What he found at the end of that road, in a cold room above a shuttered laundry, did not simply dismantle everything he believed about the woman who scrubbed his floors. It made him tear up the marriage contract and turn on the man who raised him. The blue drawing room had been shut for 11 years, and it still smelled like it. Cold plaster and old dust under the lilies. And over the top of everything, the raw, green stink of linseed oil. Because Sabine had brought a portrait painter across an ocean, Casimir Orsini stood on a low platform in front of the tall window, with his right hand resting on the back of a chair. He did not need. He had been holding the pose for 50 minutes. Chin down, Oberon said from behind the easel. No. Down and toward me? You keep drifting to the door. Casimir brought his chin down. The suit was black and cut narrow through the ribs, which was a problem, because he had refused to remove the shoulder rig underneath it. The leather pulled across his back every time he breathed. There was a hard ache building at the base of his skull, the kind that arrived when he stayed still too long in a room that wanted something from him. Sabine Marchetti lay along the chaise behind the painter with one shoe off and a tablet balanced on her knee, and she had not looked up in a quarter of an hour. Ranunculus, she said, not orchids. My mother wants orchids because she thinks they photograph as money, and they photograph as a funeral. Ranunculus, white, and the tall candles in the cathedral, not the votives. Whatever you want, you always say that. It stops being charming when I have to make every decision alone. She was a beautiful woman. He had noted it the way he noted the weather. Dark hair pulled back off a high forehead, a long throat, a mouth that had been trained since childhood not to give anything away for free. Her father owned the container terminals at the north end of the harbor and a dozen customs brokers who did what they were told. In 3 weeks, she would own half of what Casimir had spent 9 years building, and he would own half of the water. Nobody in either family had used the word love once in 8 months of negotiation, and he had always considered that the healthiest thing about it. The Archbishop sits with my father, Sabine said. Your side of the aisle is thin, Casimir. It looks like nobody came. My side is thin, because most of my side is dead. That's morbid. It's arithmetic. Oberon made a small pained noise and gestured at his own chin. Casimir brought it down again. Beyond the window, the lawn ran gray and flat. Down to the wall, and past the wall, the cypresses stood in a black line against a sky that had been threatening rain since noon. He watched a gardener drag a tarp over the pool and thought about the strongbox in the east cellar and the number that had come out of it wrong. And I want the house staff replaced, Sabine said. He looked at her for the first time in an hour. All of them, obviously, not the gardeners. The interior. She said it the way she had said ranunculus. They've been with you too long. They're sentimental about you, which means they gossip. And I'm not going to spend my marriage being managed by people who knew you before I did. We'll bring in a proper agency. Bonded, contracted, silent. Some of them have been in this house 20 years. Then they've had 20 good years. She reached down without looking and adjusted her shoe. It's cold in here, by the way. Nobody laid the fire. Casimir turned his head. The grate was clean and empty. The brass scuttle beside it stood on the hearth without a single coal in it, and the andirons had been pushed back flat against the brick, which meant they had not been touched, which meant nobody had come into this room since it was opened for the sitting. That was wrong. The fires in the ground floor rooms were laid before 6 every morning. He had never once in 4 years walked into a cold room in his own house, and he had never once thought about why, in the way that a man does not think about the floor holding him up until the day it doesn't. Oberon, he said, How long has this room been open? The painter blinked over the top of the canvas. Since Monday, Signor. They opened it and aired it for me. Who did? The old one? Adeline, a shrug. The heavy girl brought the chairs down, and then I did not see her again. The heavy girl. Casimir did not correct him, and disliked himself for the small, hot flare of temper that came and went in his chest before he could examine it. 3 mornings, 3 cold rooms, 3 mornings that he had walked past a hearth without registering it, because the absence of a thing does not announce itself the way its presence does. He stepped down off the platform. "We are not finished," Oberon said, half rising. "We are for today." Casimir Sabine put the tablet face down on the chaise, which was as close as she came to raising her voice. "The sitting is booked through Thursday. The portrait has to be hung before the rehearsal, and he has to be paid whether you stand there or not. Then, pay him." He shrugged out of the black jacket and dropped it across the arm of a chair, and the holster showed. And Oberon looked away from it very carefully, the way people always did. "Where are you going?" Casimir was already at the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and looked back at the empty grate, at the clean brass, at the room that had been cold for 3 days in a house where nothing was ever cold. "To check something," he said. Her name was Marin Kovash, and she had come into the house 4 years ago on a Tuesday, carrying 1 canvas bag and a folded reference letter from a hotel that had gone out of business, and Adeline had hired her without consulting anybody, because the last 3 girls had lasted 9 days between them. Casimir went down the service stair, thinking about her, which was itself unusual. He did not, as a rule, think about the people who cleaned his house. That was the entire architecture of it. A man in his position kept 2 categories of person around him, the ones he had to watch and the ones he did not. And the second category was supposed to be furniture, except that he knew things about her. He knew she stepped over the 4th board from the top of the back stair because it cracked like a rifle, and he had never once heard it crack under her weight. He knew she was the only person in the house who could get into the gunroom without setting off Ever, because she knocked twice, waited, and said her own name to the door before she opened it. He knew that she took the good silver out on the first Sunday of the month, whether or not anybody was coming, because his mother had done it that way, and nobody had told her that. She had simply found the notebook in a drawer and kept doing what the dead woman's handwriting said. He knew she put a spoonful of honey and a pinch of salt in his coffee, because he had an ulcer in his 2nd year running the family, and had never told a doctor about it, and one morning the coffee had simply started arriving that way and he had never asked. She was not a small woman. She was tall and wide through the shoulders and hips, and she carried it the way a door carries a hinge, without apology and without hurry, and men stepped out of her way in the corridor without ever deciding to. In February, 2 of the Mercetti soldiers had stood in the kitchen doorway with their coats open and their hands on their belts, doing the thing that men do in another man's house, to see who flinches. And Marin had walked into them with a tray of glasses and said, "Behind you," in a flat voice. She did not flinch. He had noticed that 4 years ago and then stopped noticing it. The way you stop noticing a wall. And in April, there had been a morning. He had come down at 5 for water and found her at the kitchen table in her outdoor coat, with the hem black and heavy with wet, water pooling on the flagstones under her chair, and her right hand wrapped in a dish towel. When she lifted the towel to reach for the kettle, he saw that 2 knuckles were split and swollen, the skin gone purple and shiny across the joints. "The delivery gate froze," she had said. "I put my hand into it." The delivery gate was hydraulic. It had never frozen in his life. He had stood there in his shirt sleeves at 5 in the morning with the water running, and he had accepted it, because accepting it took 4 seconds and asking about it would have taken the rest of the morning. And he had a shipment coming through the North Basin and a fiancé arriving at noon. He had never thought about that morning again until right now, going down the service stair 2 at a time. The kitchen was empty. The fires, in the small dining room and the study, were laid and lit, which meant Adeline had been doing them herself. which meant Adeline had been covering. He found her in the linen room with her arms full of pillowcases, and she went pale when she saw his face. "Where is Marin?" "Sleeping, sir." The old woman's chin came up. "She's owed it. It's 4 in the afternoon." "She's owed it," Adeline said again, and set the pillowcases down and would not say anything else, and he did not have it in him to lean on a woman who had known his mother. Renzo was waiting in the study with 2 glasses already poured, which was how Casimir knew the number was bad before either of them said anything. Renzo Havel had carried him out of the church at his father's funeral when he was 11 years old, holding him under the arms like a sack of grain while the guns were still going off outside, and had run the family for 11 years afterward until Casimir was old enough to take it back. He had handed it back without being asked. Nobody had ever needed to explain loyalty to Casimir Orsini, because he had watched it done for him. 40,000, Renzo said, give or take, over 5 weeks, out of the cellar box. Not skimmed, counted out clean. Whoever took it, took the same amount every week, and wrote nothing down. Renzo turned his glass on the desk. 3 people have the cellar key. Me, Adeline, and a girl. Say her name, Marin. Renzo watched him. She goes out at midnight. Casimir, 3 nights this week, on foot, out the delivery gate. Ivor clocked her coming back at 5:10 with her shoes ruined. He let a breath out. Let me handle it. You have a wedding. Dodge Casimir looked at the fire that Adeline had laid with her own arthritic hands, so that nobody would ask where the girl was. No, he said. I'll handle it myself. At 11:50 that night, he sat in the dark in a car parked under the cypresses with the engine off and the dome light disconnected, and at 4 minutes past midnight the delivery gate opened, and Marin Kovash came out of his house in a gray coat with a paper parcel under her arm and turned left, away from the road, away from the bus, and walked into the dark on foot. She did not look back. That was the first thing that bothered him, and it bothered him for 11 blocks. Dodge Casimir let her get 200 meters ahead before he took the handbrake off and let the car roll down the drive on the slope alone, and he did not turn the engine over until she was around the corner and the sound of it would come to her, flattened by the wall. Then he drove the way he had been taught to drive behind a man he did not want to lose. Low gear. No brake lights. Because he had pulled the fuse out before he ever sat down. Long gaps. Never the same distance twice. He need not have bothered. She walked down the middle of the pavement, with the parcel under her left arm and her head up and her hands out of her pockets, and she did not stop at a single dark window to check the reflection, and she did not cross the road for no reason, and she did not take one turn that a person takes only to see who follows them into it. She walked like a woman on the way to work. That was worse than skill. Skill he could have read. A courier looks over her shoulder. A woman going to a lover looks over her shoulder twice. A woman going to sell out the family she works for looks over her shoulder the whole way and takes a bus she does not need. Marin Kovat walked as if the city belonged to her, and nobody in it had ever once been a problem, and Casimir sat in the dark, behind a fogging windscreen, and could not make her fit any of the 3 shapes he had brought with him. The rain came on properly at the bottom of the hill. She went down through the terraces where the good houses stopped, past the shuttered fronts of the shops on Varick Street, past the last 2 street lights that still worked, and then the road tipped and she went down into Howgate. He had not been into Howgate in 9 years. There had been no reason. It was 4 streets of brick tenements and 1 canal that ran the color of tea between 2 collapsed jetties, and the whole district smelled of the rendering plant at the far end, a smell like fat left in a pan which sat on the back of the throat and did not wash off. His father had taken protection out of Howgate for 30 years, and Casimir had let it go the month he took over, not out of mercy, but because it had cost more to collect than it paid. The water came off the roofs in sheets and hit the pavement flat. Her coat was black to the thigh inside of a minute. He put the car in beside a burnt-out sodium light with the nose pointed out, killed it, and got out into the rain. He did not run. He walked 40 meters back, on the opposite pavement, with his collar up, and his hand resting on the front of his coat where the weight of the rig was, and he moved through a part of his own city that he owned on paper and had never once stood in. There were people awake at midnight? That surprised him. A man sat under the awning of a laundrette with a dog across his feet, and both of them watched Casimir go by with the incurious attention of animals in a field. Two women stood smoking under a doorway with a pram between them, and one of them said something and the other laughed. A boy of about 9 came out of an alley on a bicycle with no chain guard, freewheeling, and Marin stopped. Gachganir stepped into a doorway. She said something to the boy. The boy said something back. She took her hand out of her coat and gave him what looked like a folded note, and the boy did not thank her and did not ride off. He simply turned the bicycle around and rode ahead of her down the middle of the street, slow, standing on the pedals. He is a runner, Casimir thought, and the cold came back into him properly. She has a runner. She is not a woman going to work. She has a boy on a bicycle clearing the road in front of her. He followed for 3 more streets. At the corner of Halgate and the canal path, there was a pharmacy with steel shutters down over the window and a man standing in the recessed doorway beside it. Out of the rain, hood up, hands in front of him. Marin went straight to him. Casimir stopped behind a parked van and put his hand inside his coat. He watched her take an envelope out of the inside of the gray coat. He watched her count something out of it by feel, without looking down at it, the way a person counts who counts every day. He watched her put the money into the man's hand. And he watched the man reach behind himself into the doorway and bring out a white paper sack with the top folded over, the kind of sack that comes across a counter, and hand it to her. There it is, Casimir thought. He felt something go loose and ugly in his chest. And he was honest enough even then to recognize it as disappointment and to be surprised by the size of it. 4 years of a woman putting salt in his coffee, and this was the answer, and it was the cheapest answer there was. 40,000 out of his cellar, going into a hooded man's hand on a wet corner in Halgate at 1 in the morning. He almost went in then. He was 3 steps out from behind the van with his hand around the grip, before the man in the doorway pushed his hood back to say something, and the sodium light caught him, and Casimir stopped dead. The man was about 70. He wore a shirt and tie under his coat, and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and he had the tired, patient, apologetic face of a man who has spent 40 years behind a counter, telling people what they can and cannot afford. He was not a dealer. He was a pharmacist standing outside his own shut shop in the rain at 1 in the morning. Because somebody had asked him to, he said something to Marin. She answered. He put his hand on her arm for a second, the way an old man does, and then he went back inside through a door beside the shutters, and the light in there went off. Marin tucked the white sack into her coat, under her arm, where it would stay dry. Then she turned off the canal path, into an alley, and Casimir came out from behind the van and followed her into it. And at the far end there was a shuttered laundry, with the name Delacour still painted on the brick above the door, 4 stories of black windows over it, and a fire stair bolted to the side. She went in through a door beside the shutter. Casimir stood in the alley in the rain, with the water running off the end of his nose, and watched a light come on behind a thin curtain on the first floor. And then, through the glass, over the noise of the rain, he heard a child begin to cry. There was a flat roof over the old boiler shed at the back of the laundry, and a fire stair going up past it, and Casimir went up the fire stair in the rain, without deciding to. The window on the first floor had no blind. It had a curtain of thin cotton that had been washed until you could see the weave, and it did not meet in the middle by about a hand's width, and through that gap, from the corner of the roof, he could see most of the room. It had been the pressing floor once. It was long and low with a stamped tin ceiling, and one bulb hanging bare on a flex at each end, and the walls had been painted white so recently that he could see the roller marks. Somebody had painted this room by hand, and not very well, and not very long ago. There was almost nothing in it. 9 mattresses on the boards, single, laid out in 2 rows with a gap down the middle like a hospital ward. Blankets folded at the foot of each one. Squared off. A stack of plastic crates against the far wall, holding folded clothes sorted by size, and a handwritten card taped to each crate. 2 long trestle tables. A camping stove on a sheet of metal on the floor, with a pot on it, and beside the pot a row of 11 bowls, upside down, drying. No television, no sofa, no pictures, no rug. Nothing in that room existed to be enjoyed. Every object in it was there because somebody had needed it, and the effect was not squalor. It was the opposite of squalor. It was the room of a person who had gone through a life and taken out everything that was not load-bearing. There were women in it, and children. He counted 4 women and 5 children and 1 old man in a chair by the stove with a blanket over his knees. And one of the children was the boy from the bicycle, who had got there first and was sitting on a crate eating something out of his hand. Marin came in, and the whole room turned toward her. Not the way a room turns toward a boss. Casimir knew that turn. He had been getting it since he was 22 years old, and he could have described it in his sleep, the small stiffening, the conversation dying off at the edges. This was not that. This was the way a room turns toward. The one who has the keys and the news, and the food, which is a different thing entirely, and he found he had never once in his life been on the receiving end of it. She took the coat off. Underneath it, she was still in her house clothes, the black skirt and the gray blouse she wore to lay his fires, and she went first to the old man in the chair and crouched down, which took her a moment, and put the white paper sack into his hands. The old man tried to say something and she was already up and moving. The envelope came out of the coat pocket. Doxby Mere watched her sit down at the end of the trestle table with the envelope and a shoebox, and take a stack of smaller envelopes out of the box and begin to fill them. She did it fast. She did not count twice. Into the first envelope, a fold of notes. She wrote on the front of it and set it down. Second envelope. Third. A woman came and stood at her shoulder, and Marin said something without looking up, and the woman went away and came back with a bowl. Marin kept filling envelopes. The bowl sat at her elbow and steamed, and she did not touch it. Behind her on the white wall, there was a sheet of brown paper the size of a door, and it was covered in handwriting. He could not read it from the roof. He could see the shape of it. Columns. Names, down the left, in one hand, the same hand, and then dates, and then numbers, and a line drawn through some of the rows and not others, and the crossed-out ones were maybe a third of the page. A ledger. She kept a ledger on the wall in front of 9 mattresses. Casimir crouched on the wet roof of a boiler shed in a district he had abandoned 9 years ago, and understood that he was looking at a system. Not a charity, not a soup run, not a woman being soft with strangers. A system, run to a schedule. Out of a room, she had painted herself, funded by an envelope she carried on foot, through the rain at midnight, because she could not risk a bus fare being seen on a card. She finished the envelopes. She stood up. And Casimir shifted his weight to see the wall better, and the flashing under his heel gave with a long, tearing shriek of tin. Every head in the room came up. Marin did not run to the window and she did not turn the light off. She crossed the room to the door with the shoebox still in her hand, and she said one word to the boy on the crate. And the boy went flat on the floor between 2 mattresses, and the women moved without a sound, and Casimir realized with something cold sliding down the back of his neck that they had drilled this. She came out of the door at the bottom of the fire stair, not the top, which meant she had gone down and around, and come at him from the alley instead of up into a corner, and she had a length of steel pipe held down along her thigh. Casimir came off the last 4 steps into the light of the one working lamp. She stopped. The rain came down between them, and neither of them said anything for what felt to him like a very long time, and he watched her go through it. The pipe stayed where it was. Her face did not do any of the things a caught person's face does. There was no scramble in it. She looked at him standing in the rain in a 4,000 euro coat in an alley she had walked down 400 times. And what came across her was not fear and not guilt, and it took him another second to name it, and when he did, it went into him like a splinter. She was tired, she had been caught, and she was tired, and underneath that, she was working out how much time this was going to cost her tonight. Well, Marin said, "You're wet. Come up." She turned her back on him and walked in through the door. He followed her up a narrow stair with the wall damp on one side, and through the door at the top, and the room stopped. 9 mattresses, 11 bowls, 4 women standing in front of 5 children, and the old man half out of his chair with both hands on the arms of it, and the bare bulbs swinging very slightly on their flexes from the vibration of the door. A girl of about 6 was staring at his chest. Casimir looked down. The wet coat had pulled open, and the leather of the shoulder rig showed against the white shirt, and the girl was not frightened. She was simply looking at it steadily, the way a child looks at a dog she has been warned about. He put his hand up and unbuckled the strap at his side and shrugged the whole rig off his shoulders, gun and all, and laid it on the trestle table on top of a folded blanket. Then he took his coat off too, because it was dripping on their floor, and hung it over the back of a chair. Nobody in the room moved. "That's Casimir Orsini," Marin said, to the room, in exactly the voice she used to say that lunch was ready. "He isn't here for any of you, Danica. Take them through to the back and shut the door." The women moved. The old man stayed where he was, with his chin up, and Marin did not make him go, and Casimir understood that the old man had elected to be a witness. Then the two of them were standing at either end of a trestle table in a white room that smelled of steam and paraffin. "What is this?" Casimir said. Marin put the shoebox on the table between them and pushed it toward him with 2 fingers. "Count it," she said. "You'll want to anyway, and it'll go faster if you do it now instead of standing there deciding whether to." He did not touch the box. "I asked you what this is. You know what it is." She sat down on the bench with the weight of a woman whose feet have been on stone since 5 in the morning. "Ask me the question you actually came here to ask." Casimir looked at the wall. The brown paper hung there the size of a door, and now that he was inside the room, he could read it, and he read it standing up, from the left, the way you read a page. They were names. Down the left-hand side, in one handwriting, in pencil, so it could be changed, there were names. He knew the 3rd one, he knew the 7th. He knew the 11th, and the 11th had a wife, because Casimir had stood in a church with his hand on the woman's shoulder for the length of one photograph and had never learned what she was called. Beside each name there was a second name, and beside that a date, and beside that a figure, and then a long row of ticks going across the page. 1 for every month, and some rows had a line drawn through them and the word "closed." There were 31 rows. "Marnix," Casimir said. His voice did not come out the way he intended it to. 19 months of ticks. "His widow is Helena. She's in the back room with her hand over her son's mouth right now, because she thinks you're here to finish something." Marin said it without heat. "Her husband went into the water at the Ostro Basin in the 2nd year of the thing with the Vessus. You sent flowers. The flowers were very good. Then nothing. For 4 years. There is a fund." "There is no fund." She looked up at him. "There was a fund. Your father ran it out of the cellar box, and Renzo ran it after him, and it stopped in the spring you took over, and nobody told you it stopped, because it stopped saving you about 90,000 a year, and men do not walk into your study to tell you about 90,000 a year of nothing happening." Dudgy Azimir stood very still. "How long have you been doing this?" 4 years in June. "With what?" she said. "With my wages," in the same flat voice, and Casimir felt the floor of the room go out from under him. He did the arithmetic standing there because he could not stop himself, because arithmetic was the one thing his mind would still do. He knew to the euro what he paid her, because he signed the household schedule every January and had never once looked at the names on it. 4 years, every month, all of it. She had a bed in his house and 3 meals in his kitchen and a coat, and she had never bought anything, ever, in 4 years. And he had walked past her in the corridor 800 times and never wondered why the same gray coat. "The 40,000, he said. "I took it." She did not hesitate over it, and she did not soften it, and she did not look away. And that was the moment Casimir thought afterward. That was the exact moment. Standing in a laundry with his gun on a folded blanket 11 feet away. "Say it again." "I took 40,000 out of your cellar box in 5 payments, and I did not write it down." Marin put both hands flat on the table. "The rendering plant sold this building in February. The new owner wants it empty by the end of the month, and he was owed 11 months of arrears from before he ever bought it. And if this room empties, Pitar goes into a hospice at the county rate and dies in about 9 weeks, and Helena's boy goes into care in another district, and Danica goes back to the man she left. I paid the arrears and I bought the lease. It's in my name. It cost 38 and a half, and I've got the rest in the box, and you can count it, and then you can do whatever you were going to do." The rain came down on the tin roof. Casimir Orsini had been spoken to by federal prosecutors, by 2 archbishops, by a man holding a knife against his kidney in a stairwell in Trieste, and had always had something to say next. He stood in front of a woman on a bench, with her hands flat on a trestle table, and found that there was nothing in his mouth at all. "Why didn't you come to me?" he said at last. And Marin Kovash looked at him with something that was almost, but not quite, kindness. "Because you never asked," she said. "Not once. In 4 years. Not about them, and not about me. You'd have said yes, Casimir. But I'd have had to explain to you why. And I couldn't stand to watch you. Not know." Below them, out in the alley, a car came in slowly off the canal path, with its headlights off. Casimir crossed the room and put 2 fingers on the curtain and moved it half an inch. The car had stopped short of the laundry door with the nose out toward the canal path. 2 men. The passenger got out and stood in the rain looking up at the lit window, with his hands loose at his sides, and Casimir knew the way a man stands when he is counting floors. "Do you know that car? It's been in the alley twice this week." Marin had not moved off the bench. "Wednesday and Friday. It doesn't come in, it just sits. I thought it was the new owner's people looking at what they'd bought. It isn't." He picked the rig up off the folded blanket, put it back on, and went down the narrow stair. And he was aware, going down, that he had done that in front of her without thinking, that he had taken the gun back up, in a room full of her people, and that she had watched him do it, and had said nothing. He came out into the rain, with his hands empty and his coat open. The man by the car saw him and went still, and then his shoulders came down about an inch, and Casimir read the whole thing off him in a second and a half. Not the fear of a stranger, recognition, then relief. Then, arriving late and badly, the understanding that relief was the wrong response. "Boss," the man said. "Whose car?" "The pool car, out of the yard." "That is not what I asked you." The driver's door opened. The second one was younger, and had the sense to keep both hands on the roof where they could be seen. "Renzo," the young one said. "Renzo put us on the girl Monday. He said you'd want it done quiet, and you wouldn't want to be the one asking." The rain filled the space where an answer should have gone. "Did he tell you what to do if she went somewhere?" "Sit on it. Report the address." The young one swallowed. "He said if she went into the same building twice, the second time we call him, and not you." Casimir looked at the pool car, and the 2 wet men and the canal running black behind them between the broken jetties. "Go home," he said. "Both of you. Not to the yard. Home. If Renzo calls you tonight," she went to a hotel on Varick Street, "and sat with a man for 2 hours, and you never got a name. Say it back to me." He stood in the alley until the tail lights turned onto the canal path and went out, and then he climbed the narrow stair again, and Marin was standing at the wall of brown paper with a pencil behind her ear and the shoebox still out on the table, and he understood that she had spent those 4 minutes deciding whether to run. "They were mine," he said. "They aren't anymore. Sit down. I've been sitting since 5 this morning. Marin, she sat. Doc Casimir took the bench opposite her and put his forearms on the boards, which brought him down near her eye level, and he could not remember the last time he had arranged himself lower than another person in a room. You said. The fund stopped the spring I took over. That's what the widows say, ask any of them. She said it evenly. Helena had a payment in the March, and nothing in the April. No letter, no call, and when she went down to the yard on Ostro, the man on the gate told her there was no such thing, and never had been. They all tell the same story with different months. It stops the year you sit down, then say the rest of it. You've been holding the rest of it since I came through that door. She reached up and laid one finger on the 4th column. That's the month each of them stopped being paid. Now, look at this. She moved her hand down to a smaller sheet taped underneath. And it was not names at all. It was a column of months and a column of figures. Peter's brother worked the counting office at the Ostro yard for 11 years before his eyes went. He kept a copy of the cellar disbursement sheet every month because he was the kind of man who did that. The fund never stopped, Casimir. The money kept leaving that box every single month for 2 more years after the last widow saw a euro of it. Same figure, same line, it only stopped arriving. Casimir looked at the second sheet for a long time. Who signs a cellar disbursement? Nobody signs. You know that. Somebody initials. Her finger went down the column. It's the same initial on every line for 2 years, and it isn't yours, and it isn't your father's. He did not need her to say it. He said it himself, because there are things a man has to hear in his own voice before he will carry them. Renzo, there's more, and you'll like it less. Marin pulled a folded sheet out of the shoebox and flattened it with the side of her hand. A land registry printout, the cheap kind you buy over a counter for €6. That's the company that bought this building in February. Kelder Holdings. One director on paper, and the director is a nominee firm. And the nominee firm files out of the same address as the customs brokers who clear the North Basin. Casimir's hand stopped moving on the table. Marchetti. Kelder has bought 9 buildings in Hallgate since November. All of them on the canal, all of them between the 2 jetties. She let that sit. In 3 weeks, you marry that man's daughter and hand him half the water. And by then, he will already own every meter of the bank on this side, and he will not need you for anything at all. The bulb at the far end swung slightly on its flex. The nominee filing, Casimir said. There is always a second name on a nominee filing. Marin turned the printout around and put her finger under a line near the bottom. He read it, and read it again, and felt the last 9 years quietly change shape behind him. It was his mother's maiden name. It was the name Renzo Havel had signed every family document with for 20 years, because Casimir's father had given it to him as an honor. He got up because he could not think sitting down, and he went back to the wall, and this time he read it from the very top. The first row had a line drawn through it. The word closed was written at the end of it in the same pencil as everything else. The name on the left was Ilya Modik. The name in the second column, the column where the widow's name went, was Marin Kovash. Doc Casimir stood there, with the rain going on the tin over his head, and did not turn around. Say it, he said. He drove for you for 1 winter. Behind him the bench creaked as she stood. Not for the family, for the yard. He had a lorry license and a bad back, and he took the night runs out of Ostro because they paid 200 more a month than the day ones. He did 19 weeks. He was 34 years old, and he could not whistle, and he thought that was the funniest thing about himself. Merrick, you don't remember him. No, I know, Marin said. I've known that for 4 years. It's the part I've never been able to get all the way around. He turned. Then she was standing, with one hand flat on the trestle table and her chin level, and there was nothing pleading anywhere on her. He went out on the 5th of December in a lorry with a false floor, and he did not come back, and 11 days later, 2 men came to the flat and gave me an envelope and said there had been an accident at the basin and that the family looked after its own. Her mouth moved. There was 400 in it. 400, and a boy on the doorstep who couldn't look at me. There would have been a payment, a monthly. There would have been. There wasn't. She said it flatly. I wrote to the yard for a year. I stood outside the yard gate at Ostro in January, with a folder. Nobody took it. And in the end, I stopped being a woman who wanted money and started being a woman who wanted a name. And that is a different kind of person, Casimir. And I want you to understand that I know exactly what kind of person that is. Dak Casimir said, "You came into my house on purpose. I came into your house on purpose." The room went very quiet. Out in the back, the old man had not made a sound in 10 minutes, and Casimir found he was glad the door was shut. To do what? I didn't know. Marin gave a small, ugly laugh at herself. That's the truth, and it's a worse answer than any of the good ones. I wanted to stand in the same room as the man who gave the order and see whether he ate his breakfast. I told myself I'd know what to do when I got there. She looked at the wall. And then it was March. I was laying your fires, and you had an ulcer, and I put salt in your coffee, and I understood I had turned into somebody who was never going to do anything at all. 4 years. Her voice roughened for the first time all night. So don't stand there working out how to be gentle with me. I'm not the good one in this room. I'm a woman who took a job under a false letter, ate your food, kept your keys, and paid your debt with your own money while I let you think I was furniture, because it was easier than looking you in the face and asking you for anything. That is not devotion. That is cowardice with a ledger. You closed his row. I closed his row because there is nobody left to pay. She wiped her palm down her skirt once. There's only me, and I don't take from the box. Samir looked at the 30 rows that were not closed, and the one that was "Who gave you the house?" he said. Marin did not answer. You said a false letter. A hotel that had shut. Adeline hires nobody without a name from somebody. She has never once in her life hired a stranger off a page. He came a step closer. Who put your name in front of her? It doesn't matter now. It is the only thing in this room that matters. Who? She was silent for 3 full seconds, and Casimir watched her decide to stop protecting him, and it was somehow worse than everything else that had happened that night. Renzo Havel, Marin said. He found me on the pavement outside the yard gate in the February. He'd watched me stand there 4 Tuesdays running. He asked me if I wanted honest work in a good house, and he wrote the letter himself, and he told me the family had a soft heart about widows, and I should never mention my husband's name to a single soul inside those walls for my own sake. The paraffin stove ticked. He knew who you were, Casimir said. He knew exactly who I was. He put a dead driver's wife in your kitchen with your keys on her belt. Marin's hands had gone white at the knuckle. I've had 4 years to work out why a man does that, and I only ever get one answer that fits. He wasn't being kind, and he wasn't being careless. He was keeping me somewhere. He could reach me with a name on me that would ruin you the day he needed it to. Casimir stood in a white room above a dead laundry and understood that he had been carrying a loaded thing in his own house for 4 years, and that another man had loaded it and had chosen the corridor and had waited. He took the phone out of his coat pocket and did not go into the stairwell to do it. That was deliberate. He stood at the end of the trestle table in the middle of the room, with the wall of names behind him and the shoebox open in front of him, and he made the call where Marin could hear every word of it, because she had spent 4 years being told things about him in envelopes by other people, and he was finished with that. It rang twice. It's 2 in the morning, Sabine said. She was fully awake. She had been awake, and there was no sleep anywhere in her voice, and Casimir filed that away with everything else. How many buildings does your father own in Howgate? A pause, not a startled one, a calculating one, 2 breaths long. I have no idea what that means. Kelder Holdings, Casimir said. 9 of them. Since November, all on the canal between the jetties. He has been buying the ground under a district I walked away from, and he has been doing it with a nominee firm that files out of the same address as his customs brokers, and he has been doing it while our father's lawyers sat in a room agreeing what I was worth. Casimir, how long have you known? You are talking about property, Sabine said, and her voice had gone smooth and level, the voice of a woman stepping neatly onto ground. She had rehearsed, everybody buys property. My father buys 100 things a year. This is not a conversation. This is you standing somewhere wet, at 2 in the morning, being emotional about a maid. The room did not move. Marin did not move. You knew what I was going to be, Casimir said. You knew I was going to be a wedding photograph, and a signature, and then nothing at all. You are being ridiculous. The wedding is off. Silence on the line, long enough that he heard a car pass somewhere on her side of the city. You cannot do that. All the smoothness went out of it at once. Do you understand what has been agreed? Do you understand what my father has moved to make this happen? The people he has told, and the money that is already gone. You do not get to call this off over the phone in the middle of the night. I am not calling it off over the phone. I am telling you over the phone. Casimir kept his eyes on the brown paper. It was called off about an hour ago in a room you will never see, by a woman you told me to replace. Is she there? Yes. You are throwing away the harbor, Sabine said, and it came out of her half-strangled. For a woman who cleans your floors. Tell your father 3 things. He said it without any heat, and afterward Marin told him that the flatness of it was the thing that frightened her, more than the gun on the blanket. Tell him Kelder Holdings will not be taking possession of anything in Hellgate. Tell him that if one eviction crew, one surveyor, one man with a clipboard comes down that canal path, I will have every certificate that firm has ever filed on the desk of the Port Authority by Friday, and the brokers go with it. And tell him that I know the name on the second line of the nominee filing. He will bury you. He is welcome to try. He should know that I have nothing to lose in the way of a wedding. Casimir paused. Sabine, one more. When you tell him, watch his face when you say the name. I want to know whether he was buying Renzo or whether Renzo sold himself. It matters to me. He ended the call. Then he did the thing he had been intending to do since the alley. And he did it slowly because he wanted to feel it. He turned the phone off, took out the card, snapped it between his thumb and finger, and dropped both halves into the pot of cold water on the camping stove. The room was silent apart from the rain. Marin said, "You just cost yourself the North Basin. Yes, you could have kept it. You could have married her, and taken the water, and paid every row on that wall out of 1 month of the basin traffic, and none of these people would ever have known who paid for the roof." She was not arguing. She sounded almost as though she were making sure he had heard the option out loud, so that nobody could ever say it had been hidden from him. You'd have won. I would have been the man who did the sum, Casimir said. My father did that sum. Renzo did that sum every month for 2 years with a pencil. I am not doing it. He put his hand flat on the brown paper over the unclosed rows and left it there. Get your coat, he said. You are not sleeping here tonight, and neither is anybody else in this building. Casimir, there are 5 children through that door. It is 2 in the morning. Renzo has 2 men who have not reported an address, and by 6, he will know they did not report an address. And this is the only building in the city that has both you and that wall in it. He was already moving. How fast can Danica get them dressed? Marin was on her feet. 4 minutes, she said. Down in the alley, the boy from the bicycle came in through the door, soaked to the collarbone. And he did not knock, and he did not look at Casimir at all. Marin, the boy said, there's a lorry on the canal path with its lights off. It's got the yard name on the door. They went out through the yard door, at the back of the laundry, into a lane the lorry could not turn into, which Marin had known about, and Casimir had not, and it occurred to him somewhere in the middle of it that she had planned an exit from this building at some point in the last 4 years and had never told anybody. Ivor met them at the top of Varick Street with 2 cars and a van and no questions. because Ivor had been raised by a woman who had cleaned other people's houses and did not need any of this explained to him. By 3:30 in the morning there were 4 women, 5 children and 1 old man in the east wing of the Orsini estate, in rooms that had not been slept in since Casimir's mother died, and Adeline was going along the corridor with an armful of sheets and her mouth pressed flat and her eyes wet, and she would not look at Casimir when she passed him. Petar had to be carried up the stairs. He weighed almost nothing. He apologized the whole way. At 5, Casimir sat down in the study with the fire that somebody else had laid, and he did the only thing he had ever known how to do with a thing that hurt, which was to reduce it to numbers. "Bring the household schedule," he said. The whole file, and Emil's number, Emil Vach, was the pharmacist. He answered on the 4th ring, and did not sound surprised to be called before dawn, and Casimir asked him to itemize, and Emil, who had spent 40 years telling people what they could and could not afford, itemized. Petar Radich, chronic heart failure, on the combination that keeps the fluid off his lungs. 280 a month, if you have the entitlement card. Petar's entitlement lapsed 19 months ago, because it is tied to a fixed address and he did not have one. Full price, 440. Helena Marnix, no medication. Her boy, an inhaler and a spacer, 31. Danica, 4 months of a course, she had stopped twice. And who pays these? Casimir said. You know who pays them? Say it into the phone. Marin pays them, Emil said. Every 4th Tuesday, in cash, in the doorway, because I close at 6 and she cannot get out of that house before midnight. A pause on the line. Signore Orsini, I have never once had to remind her, not 1 month in 4 years. In February, I told her about a wholesaler's rebate that would take €11 off the total, and she made me write the number down twice so she could check it against the box. Casimir put the phone down and opened the household file. Ivor had brought all of it, the way he brought everything. Without editing, he found her line. Kavash M. General House. A monthly figure that Casimir had approved every January for 4 years with a pen he did not look up from. Then the bank sheet, because the family paid staff through an account at the Varick Street branch, and the family therefore held a mirror of it, and Casimir had never once in his life opened one, and he opened this one. 4 years of it, printed on 11 pages, money in on the 1st of every month. Money out and cash at a machine at the bottom of the hill, always within 36 hours. Always the whole amount, but for a small remainder. And the remainder never grew, because at the end of each year, it was flat again to almost nothing. There were 14 card purchases in 4 years. He read all 14. 2 pairs of shoes, both from the same discount place at the bottom of the hill. A dentist, once. A bus fare to the coast in the 2nd August, and the same fare back 3 hours later, which meant she had gone to the sea for less than an afternoon and come home. 9 pharmacy transactions, none of them for anything he could imagine her using. The account balance at close of business yesterday was €11.40. Casimir sat back in the chair in the study of a house with 14 bedrooms in it, holding 11 pages, and did the last piece of arithmetic. He had signed 482 documents in the last 12 months. He knew the yield of the North Basin per ton to 2 decimals. He knew what he paid for the cypresses to be cut. He had never once known what he paid the woman who laid his fires, and the reason he had never known was not that the information was hidden from him. It was on a sheet in a file, in a drawer, 8 feet from where he was sitting, and it had been there the whole time and no one had kept it from him, and he had simply never been curious. Adeline came in at 6:10 with the coffee. She set it down at his elbow and he looked at the cup and did not touch it, because he could smell it, and it was wrong. Bitter and clean and hot the way it had been before she came. She always did it, Adeline said, every morning. Even the mornings she'd walked back from Hallgate. I never asked her to. No, the old woman said. That's rather the point, sir. She went out and shut the door, And Casimir Orsini sat with the 11 pages in front of him and let the coffee go cold. And by the time the sky over the cypresses had gone the color of wet ash, he was no longer feeling anything that could be usefully called guilt. He was making a list. He found her at 6:20 on her knees, in front of the grate, in the East Wing corridor, with a scuttle beside her, raking out a fire that had gone cold 11 years ago. "Get up. There's 9 people in this wing, and the radiators in here have been off since before I came." She did not stop. "The old man is on the coldest side of the house," which nobody thought about at 3 in the morning, because it was 3 in the morning. "He needs the fire, so I am laying the fire." Yazimir crouched down and took the scuttle out of her hands. She let go of it. She did not want to. He could see that, but there was no fight left in her arms, and they both knew it. And for a second, neither of them moved, and her knuckles were about an inch from his, and he could see the old white scarring across the 2 that had split in April. "What happened in April?" he said. "I went to the agent for the building. He put his hand on the door frame so I couldn't leave the office, a shrug that cost her something. I moved the door frame." Casimir set the scuttle down on the boards. "Come and sit down." "If you put me in a chair in a nice room," Marin said, "and bring me a tray, and tell me it's all being handled now, I will walk out of the delivery gate tonight, and you will not find me." He looked up. She had gone very still on her knees, on the corridor floor, with ash on the heels of her hands. And there it was at last. The thing that had been underneath the flat voice all night. And it was not fear of him, and it was not shame. Say the rest of it. There are 31 names on that wall, and every one of them is a person something happened to. Her voice had gone thin and hard. "I have spent 4 years being the one who does the arriving. I am not going onto that wall. I am not going to be a row with ticks on it that a man reads out to somebody at Christmas. If that is what this is, if what you want is to be a good man about me, then say so, now, and I will go, because I would genuinely rather sleep on that floor in Hellgate." Casimir was quiet for a moment. "I have 11 pages of your bank account on the desk in my study," he said. "I have read all 14 things you have bought since the year my mother died. I have Immelbach's itemized list of what you pay for 4 people who are not related to you. You will notice that I did not put any of that in an envelope and hand it to you with a speech. Why not? Because you would have spat in my face and been right, and because none of it is what I need from you." He stood and put his hand down to her. "Halina will not talk to me. Danica will not be in a room with me." Pedar apologized 11 times on the stairs for being carried. "I have 31 names and a stack of disbursement sheets, and I cannot get one true sentence out of any of those people because I am the shape, at the end of the corridor, that their husbands went out to work for." She looked at his hand. "You want me to work. I want you to do the only thing in this that I cannot do at all." Marin took his hand and let him pull her up, and it was the first time in 4 years and 1 night that they had touched each other on purpose, and neither of them made anything of it, and both of them noticed. Halina Marnix would not sit down. She stood by the window of the East Wing sitting room, with her arms folded and her son on a chair behind her, and answered every question Marin asked her in a low, flat voice, and did not once look at Casimir, who had put himself in the corner. He was on the gate at the yard for 2 years, and then they moved him inside, Helena said. Into the counting office. He was proud of it. He had a jacket for it. When did he stop being happy? Marin said. October. No hesitation at all. Dax Casimir understood that this woman had been waiting 4 years for one single person to ask her a question, in the correct order. He came home in the October and he did not eat. He said the sheets were wrong. He said money was going out of the box every month for the widows, and he had been to see 2 of the widows himself on his own time, and neither of them had been paid in a year and a half. Casimir did not move in his corner. What did he say he was going to do? Marin asked. He said he was going to take it to the young one. Helena's chin came up. That's what they all called you. The young one. He said the young one did not know. Because if the young one knew, he'd have to be as bad as his father, and he wasn't as bad as his father, and everybody in that yard could tell. She swallowed. He was going to wait until the audit week when the office was quiet. He never got to the audit week. When did he go into the water? The 2nd of December, Helena said. And on the 12th, a man came to the flat and gave me an envelope with 400 in it and said the family looks after its own, and told me I was never to go up to the house, that it would only make trouble for me, that the young one had a temper. So, I never went up to the house. Marin had gone completely still. Describe him? Big gray at the sides, very gentle voice. Helena's mouth twisted. He held my hands. The room was quiet for a long moment. Helena, Marin said, and her voice had changed. The 2nd of December. The 2nd. Marin turned around. Casimir was already coming off the wall. The audit week, he said. The yard on Ostro shuts for the stock audit the first full week of December. It has shut that week every year since my grandfather. There are no runs out of that yard in audit week. There is no dispatch, there is no manifest, and there is nothing on the water. It is the one week of the year I know for a fact what did and did not leave that gate, because I signed the closure myself. Ilya went out on the 5th, Marin said. Ilya went out on the 5th in a lorry, with a false floor in it, that I did not put there, Casimir said, in a week when I had shut that gate, on a run that exists on no sheet I have ever signed, 3 days after your husband told you what he had found. Marin put her hand out and found the back of a chair. There was never an order, she said. There was an order, it was not mine. 4 years. It came out of her almost silently. I stood in your kitchen for 4 years, and I looked at the back of your head and I thought, that is the man. That is the man who did it, and he does not even remember the name. Marin. I wasted it on you, she said, and then her face did something it had not done all night, and she put the heel of her hand hard against her mouth and held it there, and Casimir crossed the room and did not touch her, and stood close enough that she could if she wanted to. She did not. She got hold of it. It took her about 20 seconds, and it was the worst 20 seconds of the night. Right, she said, and took her hand down. Right. Then he did all of it. The fund, my husband, Helena's husband, the building, my name on Adeline's list. All of it. One man, for money. For a long time, Casimir said. Ivor knocked once and came in without waiting, which he had never done in 6 years. Boss. The lorry crew went into the laundry at first light with a bar and a barrow, and came out with nothing. Because there was nothing in it, the walls here, it came in the van. He glanced at Marin, and then away. The 2 from the pool car aren't answering. Their families haven't seen them since 1 o'clock. And Renzo has called a sit-down at the Ostro yard at noon, with the yard closed and the gates manned, and the message came to me and not to you. And, Mercetti? Nothing, since the phone call. No crews, no surveyors, nobody on the canal path. Ivor's jaw worked. He stepped back, boss. He's watching to see who's standing at 1 o'clock. Casimir looked at the clock on the mantel. Then the handset Ivor had given him at 5 o'clock went off on the table, and the screen said, Renzo, and Casimir answered it without picking it up. The voice came into the room, warm and easy, and worn in. The voice that had told him at 11 years old to keep his eyes shut and hold on. You've had a long night, son. Come to the yard at noon, we'll sort it out. Nobody has to be clever about this. Nobody in the room breathed. Before you decide anything, Renzo said pleasantly, ask the girl what her name was before it was Kovash. The Ostro yard smelled of diesel and cold iron and the flat green rot of the basin, and the gates were open, which was the first thing Casimir noticed, and the first thing that told him Renzo still believed this was a conversation. He came in on foot at noon, with Ivor on his left and nobody else visible, which was a lie, because Ivor had put 9 men into the container stacks along the north fence at 9:30 that morning, and had put 4 more on the roof of the weighbridge office, and had done all of it with the radios off. Renzo Havel stood in the middle of the yard beside the open door of the counting office, with 6 men behind him. And when he saw Casimir, his face did something that was almost certainly genuine. He was pleased to see him. "There he is," Renzo said. "Here I am. You look like you have not slept." "I haven't." "Then let's be quick." Renzo spread his hands. The 6 behind him stayed where they were. "You've got hold of half a thing, and half a thing is more dangerous than none. So I am going to give you the whole of it, and then you are going to sit down. Your father took from that box for 11 years. Did you know that?" "Of course you didn't." "Go on." "The widow's money was a story your grandfather told the yard so that men would take the runs." Renzo said it gently, patiently, the way he had explained everything to Casimir since he was 11. "It was never a fund. It was a rumor with a line item. Your father drew it and drank it. I took over the drawing when you sat down so that at least it went somewhere useful, into keeping the North Basin open and the customs men fed, in the 2 years when this family could not have survived a bad month. I kept this house standing while you were learning the trade, and now you want to stand in my yard and be moral at me about a pencil." Behind Casimir, out along the fence, nothing moved. "You made 2 mistakes," Casimir said. "Don't." "The first is that I have the disbursement sheets, not the copies, the originals. They were in the counting office, and my people went in at 4 o'clock this morning through the door you have never once changed the lock on." He let that land. "There is a line on the 1st of January 4 years ago, Widow Marnix, monthly, paid, your initial." Renzo did not blink. "So Marnix went into the water on the 2nd of December. You gave his wife 400 in an envelope on the 12th, and then on the 1st of January, you initialed a payment to her that she has never seen a euro of." Casimir's voice did not rise. "You can steal from a box for 2 years and call it keeping the house standing, but you did not initial that line to steal 400. You initialed it so that the sheet would look ordinary. That is a man tidying up after something. So say the second mistake back to me, Renzo, because you have known what it was since 1 o'clock this morning." Nobody in the yard spoke. "Audit week," Casimir said. "I shut this yard the first full week of December. I have signed the closure myself for 9 years. Nothing left that gate on the 5th. No dispatch, no manifest, nothing on the water. And Ilya Marek drove out of it anyway 3 days after your clerk went into the basin." Renzo's jaw moved once. "You put a false floor in my lorries and you ran your own product through my gate," Casimir said. "And when a clerk found the money going missing, you put him in the basin. And when the driver saw the floor, you put him in the basin as well. And then you went and found the driver's wife standing outside the counting office, in the rain, and you wrote her a false reference, in your own hand, and you put her in my kitchen, with my keys on her belt, so that if I ever came for you, you could open your mouth and destroy me with her." "She has been in your house 4 years," Renzo said. 4 years, Casimir, sleeping under your roof, under a name that is not hers, and there are men in this city who would call that the whole story. Take a day. Think about how that sounds at a table." "It sounds bad," Casimir agreed. "So I wrote it down." Something went out of Renzo's face. "At 8 o'clock this morning I sent a sealed statement to Aurelio Marchetti, to the Port Authority, and to a lawyer in the north who has never liked me." Casimir took the folded registry printout out of his coat and held it up so that the 6 men behind Renzo could see there was paper in his hand. "It has the disbursement sheets in it, it has the closure signatures. It has the Kelder filings and the nominee address. And the second name on the filing, which is my mother's name, which my father gave to you as an honor. And it has Marin Kovash's full name, and her husband's, and the date, and every single thing she has done in my house, because you can only be ruined by a thing you are hiding." Renzo looked at the paper for a long moment. Then he looked past Casimir at the roofline behind him, and he understood what was up there, because he had put men on that fence himself for 30 years, and the last of it went out of him all at once. he was suddenly an old man in a yard. "Casimir," he said, "I carried you out of that church. I know. I held you under the arms." "I know," Casimir said. "That is why I came myself, instead of sending anybody. And it is the only kindness there is in this, and you are going to have to take it." The 6 men, behind Renzo, put their hands where they could be seen. They did it without being told. One of them said quite clearly that he had a boy at home, and Ivor told him to walk to the gate, and he walked to the gate, and the other 5 went after him. Casimir walked Renzo down between the containers to the edge of the basin, where the water sat flat and green and the wooden pylons went down into it black. "Name one of them," Casimir said. "What? There are 31 on the wall." "Name one. Not Merrick, not Marnix, any of the others. Name one man who went into this water for the family you say you kept standing." Renzo stood at the edge of the basin, with his coat over his arm and his mouth open. "Neither could I," Casimir said, "a week ago. The difference between us is that I know all of them now, and I am going to keep knowing them, and you were counting on me never learning a single one." He turned and walked back up between the containers and did not look round, and whatever was settled at the edge of that water was settled without him watching it, and it was not long. Ivor caught him up at the gate. "Boss, send the sheets to Marchetti's lawyer this afternoon. All of them. Tell him Halgate is not for sale and the North Basin is not for sale, and I will see him at the end of the month like a civilized person." Casimir was already pulling his collar up, and Ivor, the 2, from the pool car, found them an hour ago in a lockup on Varick Street, bruised, alive. "Pay them a year," Casimir said, "and let them go." The brown paper was rehung on the 4th of the month in the study of the Orsini house, on the wall opposite the window, where it got the light. Adeline had opinions about it. She said it looked like something out of a school. Then she brought the drawing pins herself and held the corner while Ivor got the top edge straight. It was the first line on the household schedule now. Not a fund and not a charity. And Casimir had refused 3 times to let anybody give it a name, because the moment a thing like that gets a name, somebody starts putting it on a plaque. It was a line item at the top of a page that said 31 families, paid monthly, arrears from the year his father died, and beneath the figure there was a space for the initial of the person who held it. Marin initialed it. She had the cellar key on the ring at her belt. Open.